Imagine a book so astonishingly prophetic that many skeptics argue it could only have been written after the events had already taken place. The book of Daniel stands as one of the most extraordinary examples of biblical prophecy, uniquely forecasting the rise and fall of great empires, from Babylon through to Rome, with striking accuracy. Yet Daniel is far more than just a prophecy book. It serves as a guide for maintaining faith and integrity under oppressive and hostile governments. This ancient text transports readers from scenes of fiery furnaces and lions' dens to cryptic dreams and apocalyptic visions. It reveals how God's faithful people can hold steadfast amid the constant upheaval of earthly kingdoms. Jesus himself referenced Daniel when speaking about the end times, underscoring its importance for understanding future events. Tonight, we delve into why the visions of this exiled Hebrew noble continue to puzzle and challenge scholars, and why Daniel's prophecies remain key to unlocking the mysteries of biblical eschatology. The story begins in 605 BC, a pivotal year that altered the course of history for a young named Daniel. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had just swept through Judah with overwhelming force, breaking through Jerusalem's defenses and reducing the city to submission. The once glorious Temple of Solomon, the heart of Israel's spiritual life, was now under foreign rule. The Bible records in Daniel 1:1 how Nebuchadnezzar came to Jerusalem during the third year of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, and laid siege to the city. This was no ordinary military campaign. Nebuchadnezzar harbored a far-reaching vision for his empire's control. He understood that to maintain true dominion, it was not enough to conquer lands with armies and walls. What was essential was to capture the minds of the brightest and most capable youths from every conquered nation, bringing them to Babylon to be trained and serve in the royal court, thus strengthening his empire's foundation. In Daniel 1:3, we read that the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief official, to select some young men from the royal family and nobility of Judah. Among those chosen was Daniel himself. One moment, he was immersed in his familiar Hebrew surroundings, worshiping in the temple, speaking his native tongue, eating according to Hebrew dietary laws. The next, he was marched hundreds of miles across deserts and rivers, watching his homeland fade into the distance forever. Daniel was not alone in this harrowing journey. Three other young Hebrew nobles, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, shared his fate. These four teenagers were the cream of Hebrew society, selected based on strict criteria. As verse 4 reveals, Nebuchadnezzar sought young men without physical defects, handsome, gifted in all forms of learning, well-informed, quick to grasp concepts, and capable of serving in the royal palace. Daniel and his friends met these stringent requirements perfectly. They embodied a rare blend of natural talent, disciplined upbringing, and inner resilience that Nebuchadnezzar's officials desired. The Babylonian re-education program began immediately and with great intensity. The first step was to strip away their heathenity through new Babylonian names. Daniel's name, meaning God is my judge, was replaced with Belteshazzar, honoring a Babylonian deity. Hananiah became Shadrach, Mishael became Meshach, and Azariah was called Abednego. Each new name was a calculated effort to erase their Hebrew roots and impose Babylonian religious and cultural identity. The educational curriculum was rigorous and immersive. For 3 years, these youths would be trained in Babylonian language, literature, history, and customs. They were expected to master cuneiform writing, court etiquette, and the religious and philosophical systems governing Mesopotamian life. The goal was total cultural assimilation, transforming Hebrew boys into loyal Babylonian officials who would serve without question. Yet, the most immediate and personal challenge came with the king's daily provisions. Nebuchadnezzar assigned them food and wine from his own table, exquisite royal delicacies and the finest wines of the ancient world. While any normal teenager might have seen this as an incredible privilege, Daniel viewed it differently. As verse 8 records, Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the king's food and drink. This was not a casual preference or a minor dietary concern. It was a deliberate act to preserve his covenant relationship with God amid immense pressure to conform. The issue went beyond dietary laws. The royal food had almost certainly been offered in sacrifice to Babylonian gods before being served, which made it unacceptable to Daniel's faith. Daniel approached Ashpenaz with a bold request to test their diet. When the official expressed concern about how the king might react, Daniel proposed an even more daring trial, a 10-day test where they would consume only vegetables and water. The results, recorded in verse 15, were astonishing. After 10 days, Daniel and his friends appeared healthier and better nourished than those who ate the king's royal food. 2 years passed in the Babylonian court, during which Daniel and his companions excelled in their studies, all while carefully maintaining their faith in secret. They learned to navigate the treacherous waters of palace politics, serving their captors with distinction, but never losing sight of their true identity as servants of the God of Israel. Then came the defining crisis that would thrust Daniel into the center of world affairs. In the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, the king was troubled by dreams he could not remember upon waking. His mind was restless, and sleep eluded him. The dreams were not mere anxieties, they were charged with prophetic significance that shook him to his core. But when he awoke, the details of the dream had evaporated like mist. Desperate to recall and understand the vision, Nebuchadnezzar summoned all the wise men, magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers of Babylon, those famed for interpreting signs and mysteries. However, Nebuchadnezzar's demand was unprecedented. He ordered them not only to interpret the dream, but also to tell him what the dream had been. The wise men protested the impossibility of such a task, but the king's fury knew no bounds. He decreed that failure to comply would result in execution and the destruction of their households. When the commander of the king's guard, Arioch, came to arrest Daniel and his friends, Daniel's character shone through. Though still a young captive, Daniel did not panic. Instead, he asked for time to seek God's revelation. That night, Daniel and his 3 companions prayed fervently. God answered, revealing the mystery to Daniel in a vision. The next day, Daniel courageously appeared before the imposing throne room of Nebuchadnezzar, where the king awaited with a mix of curiosity, hope, and barely contained anger. Daniel began with humility and wisdom, refusing to claim any personal credit or mysterious powers. Instead, he declared that no human wisdom could solve the king's problem. It was God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and God had shown Daniel the dream and its interpretation. Then, Daniel recounted the king's vision with perfect accuracy, a towering statue, dazzling and imposing, with a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and feet made of a mix of iron and clay, strong but unstable. The dream culminated with a stone, cut not by human hands, striking the statue's feet and shattering the entire image into fragments swept away by the wind. Yet the stone itself became a great mountain that filled the earth. Daniel explained that Nebuchadnezzar himself was the head of gold, followed by 3 successive kingdoms symbolized by the other metals, each inferior to the previous one. But the ultimate promise was profound. God would set up a kingdom that would never be destroyed, a divine kingdom that would outlast all earthly empires. The king was overwhelmed and honored Daniel's God as the supreme ruler, the God of gods and Lord of kings. Yet with recognition came peril, for power breeds envy and enemies. Nebuchadnezzar soon erected a colossal golden image, 90 feet high and 9 feet wide, on the plain of Dura. This statue was not merely an artistic display, but a test of loyalty imposed upon the empire. A herald proclaimed that upon hearing the sound of various musical instruments, all peoples must bow and worship the image, or face death by a blazing furnace. As the music played, thousands complied, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Daniel's friends, stood firm in defiance. Their refusal was a powerful statement of faith and loyalty to God. When accused before the king, Nebuchadnezzar gave them one last chance to submit, warning that refusal meant immediate execution. Their answer echoed through the centuries. If we are thrown into the furnace, our God can save us, but even if he does not, we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image. Nebuchadnezzar, enraged, ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual. The heat was so intense that it killed the soldiers who carried the 3 men. Bound and cast into the fire, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were expected to perish instantly. Yet to the king's amazement, he saw not 3 but 4 figures walking unbound and unharmed in the flames, the 4th appearing divine. When they emerged, not a hair on their heads was singed, their robes untouched, and no smell of fire clung to them. Years passed and Nebuchadnezzar's empire thrived, but prosperity dulled his memory of God's intervention. His pride led to another vision, a great tree symbolizing his kingdom, towering and majestic. Yet the tree was to be cut down and stripped, leaving only a stump bound with iron and bronze. This vision foretold Nebuchadnezzar's humbling. For 7 years, he would live like a wild animal until he recognized God's sovereignty over earthly powers. This prophecy came to pass. The mighty king lost his sanity, wandered in the wilderness eating grass, but eventually his reason returned. He worshipped the Most High and acknowledged divine authority, forever changed. However, his grandson Belshazzar forgot these lessons. Arrogant and reckless, Belshazzar held a lavish feast using sacred vessels from the Jerusalem temple, drinking wine and praising pagan gods in blatant blasphemy. Suddenly, a mysterious hand appeared and wrote cryptic words on the palace wall. Terrified, Belshazzar called for his wise men, who were powerless to interpret the writing. It was Daniel, now an old man, who was summoned. He rebuked the king for his arrogance and interpreted the writing. God had numbered the days of his kingdom and found it wanting. That very night, Babylon fell to the Medes and Persians. Despite his advanced age, Daniel was appointed by the new king Darius as a high official over the kingdom. His exceptional qualities earned him favor, but also enemies. Jealous officials plotted against him, knowing his faithfulness to God was his vulnerability. They tricked King Darius into issuing a decree forbidding prayer to anyone except the king for 30 days, intending to trap Daniel. Unfazed, Daniel continued praying openly to God 3 times daily. The conspirators reported him, and Darius, though distressed, was bound by law. Daniel was thrown into a den of hungry lions. The king spent a sleepless night, anxious for Daniel's fate. At dawn, Daniel's calm voice assured him that God had sent an angel to shut the lions' mouths. Daniel emerged unharmed, and the king ordered his accusers thrown to the lions, who devoured them instantly. Following the dramatic rescue from the lion's den, Daniel's life entered a new phase, filled with visions that would reveal the unfolding of world history in vivid and often terrifying detail. One of his earliest and most profound dreams came while he lay on his bed, during the reign of King Belshazzar. He saw the great sea churned by powerful winds, symbolizing the chaos and turbulence of nations and empires. From this turbulent sea emerged 4 massive beasts, each unlike the others, representing 4 successive kingdoms that would dominate the earth. The first beast was like a lion with eagle's wings. This symbolized Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar, majestic and fierce. Daniel watched as the wings were torn off, and the beast was made to stand like a man, given a human mind. This reflected the king's period of madness and subsequent restoration to sanity. The second beast appeared as a bear raised on one side with 3 ribs in its mouth, commanded to devour much flesh. This represented the Medo-Persian Empire, where one part, Persia, was stronger than the other, Media. Next came a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads, symbolizing the swift conquests of Alexander the Great's Greek Empire and its eventual division into 4 separate kingdoms after his death. But it was the 4th beast that terrified Daniel the most. Unlike any known animal, it was dreadful and powerful, with large iron teeth that crushed its victims and 10 horns, symbolizing a fearsome, destructive empire, far more brutal than those before it. As Daniel observed, thrones were set in place in heaven, and the Ancient of Days, the eternal God, took his seat, clothed in white, his throne blazing with fire. A vast heavenly court convened with thousands attending. Books were opened, and divine judgment was pronounced on the 4th beast, which was slain and its body destroyed in blazing fire. This scene underscored God's ultimate authority over earthly powers and the certainty that no evil reign lasts forever. Then Daniel witnessed one like a son of man approaching the Ancient of Days, who was given everlasting dominion, glory, and a kingdom that would never be destroyed. This kingdom was not earthly, but divine and eternal, in stark contrast to the temporary and violent reigns of the beasts. Daniel's vision emphasized that while earthly kingdoms rise and fall, God's kingdom stands forever, and those who are faithful will receive it as an everlasting inheritance. 2 years later, Daniel was granted another vision that took place by the Ulai Canal in the citadel of Susa, a key city in the Persian Empire. There, he saw a ram with 2 horns, one longer than the other, charging in all directions with overwhelming power. This ram represented the Medo-Persian Empire, with its two joined powers but one ultimately dominant. Suddenly, a swift goat appeared from the west with a prominent horn between its eyes, crossing the earth without touching the ground. This goat charged at the ram with great fury, breaking its two horns and trampling it completely, signaling the rise of the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great. But the goat's large horn was broken, and in its place grew four smaller horns, symbolizing the division of Alexander's empire among four generals. From one of these horns arose a smaller, more sinister horn that grew in power toward the south, east, and the beautiful land, a reference to Israel. This little horn challenged the true worship of God, throwing down the sanctuary and stopping the daily sacrifices. This represented a powerful king who would persecute God's people and desecrate the temple, a figure who would cause great suffering and spiritual rebellion. Daniel overheard a conversation between two holy beings about how long these events would last. The answer was precise: 2,300 evenings and mornings, after which the sanctuary would be cleansed and restored. The vision was overwhelming, and Daniel was physically exhausted, needing days to recover from the intensity of what he had seen. To help Daniel understand, the angel Gabriel appeared, explaining that the ram represented the kings of Media and Persia, the goat was the king of Greece, and the large horn was its first king. The four horns that replaced the broken horn were four kingdoms that would rise from the Greek Empire, and the little horn was a king who would arise later, destined to be destroyed not by human hands. Daniel's final revelation came in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, when he was an elderly man mourning and fasting for 3 weeks in deep spiritual preparation. On the 24th day of the 1st month, by the great river Tigris, Daniel had an awe-inspiring vision. His companions fled in terror, but Daniel alone witnessed a majestic figure clothed in linen, with a golden belt, a face like lightning, eyes like flaming torches, arms and legs gleaming like polished bronze, and a voice like a multitude. This vision left Daniel weak and pale, overwhelmed by its glory. The glorious being spoke to him, encouraging him and revealing the spiritual realities behind the world's events. Daniel was told that from the day he began seeking understanding and humbling himself before God, his prayers had been heard, but the angel had been delayed for 21 days by the prince of the kingdom of Persia, a powerful spiritual being resisting God's messenger. Only with the help of Michael, the chief prince and protector of Israel, was the angel able to break through and reach Daniel. This revelation unveiled an unseen spiritual battle behind earthly kingdoms and explained why God's answers sometimes seem delayed. It also set the stage for one of the most detailed prophecies in Scripture, outlining the exact sequence of kings and conflicts that would unfold over the next several centuries. The angel spoke of 4 more kings in Persia, the last being wealthier and stirring conflict with Greece. Then came a mighty Greek king who would rise and rule with great power, but whose empire would be broken into 4 parts. The prophecy detailed the ongoing struggles between two kingdoms, the king of the north, Syria, and the king of the south, Egypt, whose conflicts would shape Middle Eastern history for generations. Through alliances, battles, betrayals, and invasions, the angel described a complex and turbulent history with remarkable accuracy. Central to this narrative was a contemptible ruler who would arise without royal honor but would seize power through deceit and cunning. This figure would persecute God's people, desecrate the temple, abolish daily sacrifices, and set up an abomination that causes desolation, an ultimate act of blasphemy and rebellion. Despite severe persecution, the prophecy offered hope. Some of the wise would stumble and be refined, purified, and made spotless until the time of the end. Then, at the climax of history, a king of unprecedented arrogance and power would emerge, exalting himself above all gods and declaring himself divine. This final ruler would wage devastating wars opposed by kings from the north and south and would invade many countries with overwhelming force. However, his reign would end suddenly and decisively. No one would help him in his final defeat. At that time, Michael, the great protector of God's people, would rise, ushering in a period of unprecedented trouble, but also deliverance for the faithful. Multitudes who had died would awaken, some to eternal life, others to everlasting shame and contempt. The faithful would shine brightly like stars forever. Daniel was instructed to seal these words until the end times, as the full meaning and fulfillment of these prophecies would only become clear in the future. Despite his deep understanding, Daniel confessed he did not fully grasp everything, yet he faithfully recorded what he was told. As the vision closed, the angel swore an oath by the eternal God that these events would unfold over a specific period, a time, times, and half a time, 3.5 years, during which the power of the holy people would be broken, but also be completed in God's perfect timing. As Daniel continued to grapple with the profound visions and revelations, the angel's message emphasized that these prophetic words would be sealed until the appointed time, the time of the end, when they would be fully understood and fulfilled. Despite the overwhelming nature of these prophecies, Daniel was assured that God's sovereignty and justice would ultimately prevail and the faithful would be vindicated. In the years that followed, Daniel witnessed the ongoing rise and fall of empires, and even as he aged into his 90s, he remained a faithful servant in the courts of foreign rulers, demonstrating unwavering integrity and devotion to God. His life was a testament to steadfast faith amid political upheaval and personal danger. The detailed visions he received laid out a timeline of history that extended far beyond his own lifetime, reaching into the distant future and offering hope to generations yet to come. Daniel's visions revealed the spiritual battles waged behind the scenes of human history. Powerful angelic and demonic forces influenced the course of kingdoms and the fate of nations. The Prince of Persia, a demonic figure with authority over the Persian Empire, had resisted the angelic messenger for 21 days, requiring the intervention of Michael, the archangel and protector of Israel, to break through. This spiritual warfare underscored the reality that the earthly struggles Daniel and his people faced were part of a larger cosmic conflict. The angel then provided a detailed account of future kings and kingdoms. After the Persian rulers, a mighty Greek king would rise and dominate with unprecedented power. Following his reign, the empire would fracture into 4 parts, represented by 4 horns that sprouted from the broken horn of the goat. These divisions set the stage for centuries of conflict between the king of the north and the king of the south, corresponding historically to the Seleucid and Ptolemaic dynasties of Syria and Egypt. The prophetic description included alliances, betrayals, battles, and shifting political landscapes, all remarkably detailed. Central to this unfolding drama was the emergence of a contemptible person, one who would rise to power through intrigue and deceit without receiving royal honor. This figure would fiercely oppose God's people, desecrate the temple, and abolish the daily sacrifices, setting up what Daniel called the abomination that causes desolation. This abomination was a profound act of blasphemy that would disrupt the worship of God and bring severe persecution to the faithful. Yet, amidst the darkness, the prophecy assured that God's people would endure. Some would falter and stumble, but this would serve to refine and purify them until the time of the end. The angel described a final king who would be even more ruthless and arrogant than his predecessors. This king would exalt himself above all gods, utter blasphemous words against the God of gods, and act with impunity until the full measure of God's wrath was complete. The end times would be marked by fierce conflicts involving the king of the south and the king of the north, culminating in a great and sudden destruction. This last ruler would camp between the seas near the beautiful holy mountain, likely a reference to Jerusalem. Yet despite his power, he would meet a decisive end without anyone to aid him. At this climactic moment, Michael, the great prince and protector of Israel, would arise to defend God's people during a time of unprecedented distress, a period unlike any other since nations first existed. This divine intervention would signal the close of human rebellion and the dawn of God's final judgment. The prophecy culminated in the resurrection, where multitudes who had died would awaken, some to everlasting life, others to shame and eternal contempt. This was not a universal salvation, but a distinction between those who had been faithful and those who had rejected God. The faithful would be honored, shining like stars forever, leading many to righteousness. Daniel was instructed to preserve and seal these words until the appointed time, for they were meant not only for his generation, but for all who would live in the last days. Despite his deep desire to understand, Daniel confessed his limited comprehension of the full meaning and outcome of these events, underscoring the mystery that surrounds the unfolding of God's plan. The angel concluded with a solemn oath, raising his hands to heaven and declaring that the period of tribulation would last a time, times, and half a time, 3.5 years, after which God's purposes would be fulfilled completely. This specific time frame would mark the duration of the final persecution of God's holy people, after which divine intervention would bring resolution. Though Daniel would not live to witness the fulfillment of most of these prophecies, the promise was clear. He would rest in death until the end of days, when he would rise to receive his inheritance, the reward for his faithful service. His life and visions served as a beacon of hope and assurance for believers enduring trials, emphasizing that God remains in control even when earthly powers seem overwhelming. Daniel's story concludes with him returning to his daily duties, carrying the profound secrets of the future. He trusted fully in God's perfect timing, confident that all events would unfold according to divine wisdom and that the kingdom of God would ultimately triumph. This remarkable journey through captivity, faithfulness, visions, and prophecy reveals the enduring message of the book of Daniel. God is sovereign over all history, working through and beyond human kingdoms, guiding his people through every trial and ensuring that his eternal kingdom will prevail forever. Following Daniel's profound visions and prophetic insights, the narrative shifts toward the practical and often perilous realities Daniel faced while serving under successive rulers in Babylon and later Persia. Despite his advanced age, Daniel remained a key figure within the empire's administrative framework, earning distinction for his wisdom, integrity, and unwavering commitment to his faith. His remarkable ability to interpret dreams and solve mysteries brought him favor, yet it also sparked jealousy and hostility among other officials who sought to undermine him. The tension escalated when Daniel's exceptional qualities led the king to plan appointing him as the highest official over the entire kingdom. This prospect infuriated jealous courtiers who, unable to find any fault or corruption in Daniel's conduct, sought a more insidious means to eliminate him. Recognizing that Daniel's devotion to God was his only vulnerability, they cunningly crafted a trap centered around a royal decree that forbade prayer to any god or human except the king himself for 30 days. Violation of this decree meant immediate punishment by being thrown into the lion's den. Daniel's response to the decree was fearless and resolute. He continued to pray 3 times daily, openly facing the danger with unwavering faith. His enemies, ever watchful, they seized this opportunity and reported Daniel's defiance to King Darius. Although distressed and desperate to save his trusted advisor, the king was bound by the irrevocable laws of the Medes and Persians. Reluctantly, he ordered Daniel's imprisonment in the lion's den, sealing the entrance with his own signet ring to prevent any tampering. The night that Daniel spent in the den was one of anguish for King Darius. He could neither eat nor sleep, consumed by worry over Daniel's fate. At dawn, the king rushed to the den and called out in a voice filled with hope and desperation. To his overwhelming relief, Daniel answered, unharmed and steadfast. Daniel explained that God had sent an angel who shut the mouths of the lions, protecting him because he was found innocent before God and the king. The king's joy was boundless, and he ordered Daniel's release immediately. Justice prevailed when the king commanded that Daniel's accusers, the very men who had conspired against him, along with their families, be thrown into the lion's den. Unlike Daniel, they were not spared, and the lions quickly destroyed them. This stark contrast highlighted God's protective power over his faithful servant and the certainty of divine judgment against evil. As Daniel continued to serve under the new regime, the Persian Empire, his prophetic visions grew even more complex and far-reaching. One of his most dramatic dreams depicted 4 great beasts emerging from the turbulent sea, each representing successive world empires that would dominate the earth. The first beast, like a lion with eagle's wings, symbolized Babylon. The tearing off of its wings and the granting of a human mind reflected Nebuchadnezzar's period of madness and restoration. The second beast, a bear raised on one side with 3 ribs in its mouth, symbolized the Medo-Persian Empire, indicating the unequal strength between Media and Persia. The third, a swift leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads, represented the rapid expansion and subsequent division of Alexander the Great's Greek Empire into 4 parts. The fourth beast was unlike any known animal, terrifying, powerful, with iron teeth and 10 horns, symbolizing a destructive kingdom that would devastate the earth. This beast's eventual destruction by divine judgment was portrayed in a majestic courtroom scene where thrones were set, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. Flames and fire accompanied his throne, and countless angels attended, with books opened for judgment. Amid this cosmic trial, the fourth beast was slain and cast into a blazing fire that signaling the end of oppressive earthly powers. Following this, Daniel saw one like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven, who was given eternal authority, glory, and a kingdom that would never be destroyed. This kingdom, unlike the temporal empires of the beasts, would be everlasting and sovereign, ruled by a divine figure worshipped by all nations. Daniel's anguish over the vision was evident as he sought understanding from a heavenly messenger. The angel explained the beast's representation of kingdoms rising from the earth, but emphasized the ultimate hope for God's holy people who would receive and possess the eternal kingdom forever. Years later, Daniel received another vision set in the citadel of Susa by the Ulai Canal. This vision introduced powerful symbolic animals, a ram with 2 horns, the longer one rising last, charging in all directions, embodying overwhelming military might. Opposing it was a swift goat with a prominent horn, which shattered the ram's horns and triumphed decisively, symbolizing the Greek conquest of the Persian Empire. However, the goat's large horn was broken, giving way to 4 smaller horns representing the division of Alexander's empire after his death. From one of these horns emerged a little horn that grew in power toward the south, east, and the beautiful land, Israel. This horn's audacity extended to assaulting the heavenly host, casting stars to the earth, and opposing God's daily sacrifices by desecrating the sanctuary. Daniel overheard a crucial question about the duration of this vision, concerning the cessation of daily sacrifices and the desolation it would cause. The answer was a precise period of 2,300 evenings and mornings, after which the sanctuary would be restored and cleansed. The intensity of the vision left Daniel physically exhausted and troubled beyond understanding. To clarify, the angel Gabriel was sent to explain that the ram represented the kings of Media and Persia, the goat symbolized the king of Greece, and the prominent horn was the first king of Greece, Alexander. The 4 horns signified the 4 kingdoms that emerged after Alexander's death, and the little horn represented a future king who would arise later, defeated not by human hands, but divine intervention. In his final revelation, Daniel experienced a vision during the reign of Cyrus the Persian, following a 3-week period of mourning and fasting marked by self-denial. Standing by the great river Tigris, Daniel saw a man clothed in linen with a radiant and awe-inspiring appearance, whose voice sounded like a multitude. The overwhelming vision left Daniel weak and pale, unable to stand until a gentle hand helped him rise. The angel reassured Daniel, affirming that his prayers had been heard from the first day of his seeking understanding. Yet, the angel also revealed the existence of a spiritual battle. The prince of the Persian kingdom resisted the angelic messenger for 21 days until Michael, the great prince and protector of Israel, came to aid. This insight unveiled the unseen realm's intense struggle, influencing earthly affairs, and underscored the importance of persistent prayer and faith. With this spiritual backdrop, the angel proceeded to unfold the most detailed prophecy in the Bible, outlining the exact sequence of kings and kingdoms from Daniel's time into the distant future. The 4th Persian king would be wealthier than all others and would instigate conflict with Greece, sparking a series of wars that Daniel's earlier visions had foreshadowed. A mighty king would rise, ruling with great power and doing as he pleased, but his empire would ultimately fragment into 4 parts, divided toward the 4 winds of heaven. Detailed descriptions followed of the prolonged conflicts between the northern and southern kingdoms, marked by alliances, betrayals, invasions, and counterattacks. This historical accuracy underscores the depth of divine revelation. Amid these events, the prophecy foretold the rise of a contemptible person, one without royal honor, who would seize power through intrigue and deceit, initially succeeding in military campaigns, but ultimately opposing the Holy Covenant. This king would provoke persecution, desecrate the temple, abolish daily sacrifices, and establish the abomination causing desolation, bringing suffering to God's people. Despite these trials, the prophecy offered hope. Some would stumble but be refined and purified until the time of the end. The narrative then shifted to the final and most sinister ruler of all, who would exalt himself above every god and speak blasphemies against the God of gods. His reign would last until God's wrath was complete, culminating in a sudden and decisive end. This king would disregard the gods of his ancestors, honoring instead a god of fortresses, an unknown deity, and would amass great military power. The final conflict would involve the kings of the north and south engaging in devastating warfare, with the end coming suddenly and decisively. At the height of this turmoil, Michael, Israel's protector, would rise to defend God's people during unparalleled distress. This intervention would mark the close of human rebellion and the ushering in of divine judgment and resurrection, where all the dead would awaken, some to eternal life, others to everlasting contempt. The faithful would shine like stars forever, and Daniel was charged to preserve these prophecies until the end of days. Though Daniel's earthly life would end before witnessing these final events, the promises of resurrection and reward provided hope that transcended his lifetime. This extensive prophetic journey reveals the complexity of God's plan for history, emphasizing his sovereignty, the reality of spiritual warfare, the certainty of judgment, and the ultimate triumph of his eternal kingdom. Daniel's unwavering faith amid exile, persecution, and mystery offers a powerful example to all who seek to remain steadfast in turbulent times, trusting that God's purposes will prevail in perfect timing. As Daniel's life drew toward its close, his prophetic revelations stood as a testament to the incredible breadth and depth of God's unfolding plan for the world. Though Daniel himself would not witness the fulfillment of many prophecies he received, his faithfulness in recording these divine mysteries provided a beacon of hope and clarity for future generations. The visions he received illuminated the rise and fall of empires, the spiritual battles behind worldly events, and the ultimate victory of God's kingdom that transcends all earthly powers. Throughout his extraordinary journey, Daniel faced exile, temptation, and life-threatening challenges, yet he remained resolute in his devotion to God. His refusal to compromise, whether by refusing the king's royal food, standing firm against idolatry, or praying despite deadly decrees, exemplifies unwavering faith and courage. These stories, woven throughout his prophetic mission, teach profound lessons about integrity and trust in divine providence amidst adversity. The unfolding prophecies revealed that human history is not a chaotic or random sequence of events, but is under the sovereign control of a divine ruler. From the golden head of Babylon to the iron legs and clay feet of the final kingdom, each empire serves a purpose within God's plan, rising and falling according to his will. The striking imagery of beasts and statues portrays the impermanence of earthly powers, setting the stage for the eternal kingdom established by the Son of Man, a kingdom characterized by justice, peace, and everlasting dominion. Daniel's vision of the heavenly courtroom conveys a powerful message. All rulers, regardless of their might, are accountable to the divine judge. This scene of judgment emphasizes that ultimate authority belongs to God alone, who will bring an end to corruption and oppression. The subsequent promise that the holy people will receive the kingdom forever offers reassurance that faithfulness will be rewarded beyond the temporal struggles faced on earth. The spiritual warfare unveiled in Daniel's later visions reveals the invisible realities influencing the course of history. The resistance faced by angelic messengers and the intervention of Michael highlight the intense conflict between good and evil forces. This spiritual dimension invites believers to understand the importance of prayer, perseverance, and trust in God's protection amid unseen battles. The detailed prophecies about Persian and Greek kings, their wars, alliances, and intrigues underscore the remarkable accuracy of divine revelation. The rise of the contemptible person and the abomination causing desolation foreshadow the trials and persecutions that God's people would endure. Yet even in this dark period, the promise of purification and ultimate deliverance remains steadfast. The final ruler's arrogance and blasphemy exaltation above all gods, and eventual downfall remind readers that no human power can withstand God's judgment. The prophecy culminates with the triumphant intervention of Michael and the resurrection of the dead, affirming the hope of eternal life for those who remain faithful. This eschatological vision serves as a foundation for biblical hope, encouraging believers to persevere through present difficulties with their eyes fixed on the eternal reward. Daniel's closing message to seal the prophecy until the time of the end signifies that these revelations are not merely historical or symbolic, but carry urgent relevance for future generations. His example challenges readers to live with faithfulness and anticipation, trusting that God's timing is perfect and that his kingdom will ultimately prevail. The book of Daniel stands as a profound source of inspiration, combining narrative drama with prophetic insight. It invites reflection on the nature of power, the reality of spiritual conflict, and the assurance of divine sovereignty. Above all, it encourages steadfastness in faith, offering hope that transcends every trial and points toward the eternal kingdom where God reigns supreme. Through Daniel's story, we are reminded that faith is not merely a private matter, but a courageous witness in the face of opposition. His life encourages us to stand firm in our convictions, to seek understanding through prayer, and to trust that God is actively involved in human history. Daniel's unwavering devotion under foreign rule and through personal danger serves as a timeless example of loyalty to God above all else. As we reflect on the book's powerful themes, we recognize that the ultimate victory belongs to God and his faithful people. The promise that those who are wise will shine like stars forever underscores the reward awaiting those who persevere. This vision invites believers to find courage and hope amid the uncertainties of life, knowing that God's purposes will be fulfilled and that a new, perfect world awaits. In conclusion, Daniel's prophetic journey offers both challenge and comfort. It confronts us with the reality of a world marked by conflict and corruption, while simultaneously revealing the hope of divine intervention and restoration. His story urges us to remain faithful, courageous, and hopeful, trusting that God's kingdom will ultimately triumph over all earthly powers. May Daniel's legacy inspire us to live with unwavering faith, confident that, like him, God has a plan for each of our lives, a plan that will be fulfilled in his perfect timing and glorious kingdom.